All in favor? Motion's carried. Moving forward, adoption of the minutes. Special council meeting of February 13th. Councillor Brooks Hill, Councillor Charlotte. Adoption of the minutes of the special council meeting of February 18th. Councillor Charlotte, Councillor Brooks Hill. Adoption of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 25th, 2020. Councillor Charlotte, Councillor Brooks Hill. Any business arising from those minutes? Special council minutes, February 13th. Councillors, any questions about that? Seeing none, moving on to special council minutes of February 18th, 2020. Seeing none, moving on to the regular council minutes of February 25th, 2020. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to announcements from the mayor. As most of you have seen in local media but may not know, Minister Judy Hardy, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions, gave me a phone call yesterday afternoon, and we have received a grant through UBCM Community Wellness in the amount of $33,789, nice round number, to go for our community wellness and harm reduction regarding substance abuse and anti-stigma resources. So we're grateful to the provincial government for bringing that forward, and through UBCM. It's great to see the grants that we apply for come to fruition. We have a delegation today, so Cathy English, our curator of the museum, is here to make a presentation. Come on forward, Cathy.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Mayor Sulz and councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today to give our annual update on Revelstoke Museum and Archives. From our financial and activity reports which you received, it is clear that we had another successful year. We continue to engage the community and visitors in learning about the vibrant history of Revelstoke through our programs, exhibitions, and social media presence. This past year was one of our busiest ever in terms of school programs. We went from 15 school groups in 2018 to 37 in 2019. Part of the success was the development of new lessons around the Stories Beneath the Surface exhibit and our Xenaics exhibit and others. The museum content fits well with many of the new curriculum objectives, and by working with the local teachers, we have developed programs that match the learning needs of many different grade levels. Our summer children's programs were down in attendance this past summer, so we will be looking at ways to change our format and delivery in order to keep these programs meaningful for Revelstoke families. Brown bag history and our walking tours continue to be successful, with more than 600 people attending these presentations over the past year. Our adult programs attract both locals and visitors. I actually did looked at some numbers over the last 10 years. In 2009, I had an average of 6 people attending brown bag history, and in 2019, I had an average of 27 attending brown bag history. So I've been doing it for 18 years now, and it continues to be popular. We opened a major new exhibition in 2019 on Mount Revelstoke National Park in partnership with the national parks, as well as some smaller exhibits on some of our historic businesses and hotels, including one called the King Edward Hotel, aka Hagenslug. We have just received confirmation of funding from the Museum's Assistance Program of the federal government to create a traveling version of our Land of Thundering Snow exhibit on avalanches in Canada. The exhibit will travel to Whistler this fall and Canmore in the spring, with several other museums already expressing interest. This will increase the reach of this important exhibit and create another revenue source for the museum, as well as making our profile in the museum community that much bigger. We are continuing our research and interpretation of the history of the impact of the Hugh Kingsley Side Down in the valley south of Revelstoke, and we are looking forward to premiering a short film and theatrical presentation on this subject this coming fall. We received funding in 2019 from the Documentary Heritage Program of Library and Archives Canada to digitize our CPR accident reports. These records date from 1909 to the 1930s and include reports on avalanches, wrecks, derailments, and other accidents. Our contract worker, Harumi Sakayama digitized over 12,000 records, and they're now indexed in our collections database and easily accessible to researchers. We get more than 300 research requests every year, many of them involving family research, and having our collections digitized and indexed makes it much easier to connect people with the information they are looking for. It is very satisfying for us to be able to help people connect with their own history. This past year, I was able to reconnect 3 separate branches of one pioneer Revelstoke family. I find it especially rewarding to research the history of the community and see patterns and trends over the years. While doing the weekly glimpses of the past column for the Revelstoke Review, I'm able to see how some things never change, such as bike thieves, people complaining about sidewalks, and complaining about the government in general. For example, the city finances were audited in 1910 and found to be in excellent shape. The editor made this tongue-in-cheek comment. Since Auditor Stein made his report on the city finances, some citizens appear to have gone into mourning over the discovery that Revelstoke is not bankrupt and that former mayors, aldermen, or city officials have not stolen the city funds. We're fortunate to have a skilled and active board of directors that really provide good leadership and good financial oversight to the museum, as well as an amazing group of close to 50 volunteers who donated more than 1,000 work hours for tasks such as gardening, events, school programs, collections management, research, and more. Their skill and dedication help to keep the museum vibrant and welcoming for all. On behalf of our board of directors, I would like to extend our sincere thanks to the City of Revelstoke for their ongoing support of the museum. We appreciate the help and support of Laurie Donato, Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, as well as the Public Works staff that help to keep our beautiful heritage building in such good shape. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Cathy. Appreciate your report, and we thank you for all that you do, especially for the history of the community. I'm a youngster here, and I remember the days at the Hug and Slug, and with fondness as a young auxiliary police officer walking through there. You can't unsee some of that. So thank you. Councillors, any questions or comments regarding Cathy's work or her presentation today? All right. Thank you, Cathy. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Council, we're going to move on to 11A, staff reports, getting into finance. Somebody want to put this first motion on the table and we'll talk about it. Councillor Brooks Hill.
That the 2020 to 2034 long-term financial plan be approved as presented to the public on February 27th, 2020.
Is there a second for that motion? Councillor Charlotte. Any comments or questions of Ms. McCabe? Councillor Roy.
Yeah, so we got the next motion to, it looks like we should, am I reading this wrong? It feels like the second motion should be read first, right? Because we're accepting the public consultation report and then voting on the motion to...
Ms. McCabe, you want to, we've got them in the right order. We're going to talk about the long-term plan or what first?
Yes, they are in the right order, Your Worship. We need to get the budget that was proposed to the public approved in that format, and then I need an approval to prepare the financial plan bylaw and tax rate bylaw using that approved plan.
Okay.
Okay, so if there were any adjustments, it would be made at the next motion.
No.
No, right at this motion. Okay. So should we talk then about the public consultation report?
You can.
Okay. So I just wanted to make a comment about sidewalks. I know there have been a lot of people interested in getting those, and Mayor Sulz, you and I had spoken about how the school district and engineering and
RCMP.
and school district and the police are working on a network of trails. Can you just elaborate a little bit on that for the public?
I'm going to let Mr. Black speak to this because this was his initiative a couple months ago. He started a safety audit in relation to the schools. Mr. Black?
Your Worship, yes, thank you. We are very excited about this little program we're undertaking with Bugged Consultants. We're traffic and safety engineers based out of Calgary office. Based upon a site visit that I conducted with the chief of the RCMP at Arrow Heights School and Columbia Park on a field trip, we determined there is some very simple things I think we can do to improve the safety around the school for children and drop-off areas, and formalizing some of the activities that go along with the daily drop-off and pickup. In addition, we need to then look at the bigger cost items, which are network sidewalks, where those go, and those will then fall under the master transportation plan, which will then drive where in the community we will have sidewalks. And so it's a multi-step plan. The first thing we're going to do is try and mitigate some of the issues around the schools with this study, undertake some signage, striping, perhaps some sidewalks right adjacent to the schools, and then in the long term, understand the need for sidewalks around the schools and throughout the community.
Did that answer your question,
Yeah,
Councillor?
that's great. So the timeline, it's underway, and then the master transportation plan won't be addressed until the assessment's done through the consultants?
Well, we have set aside funds for master transportation plan upgrade, which is required for us to also complete the OCP and the DCC bylaw updates. There was a report completed in 2010, which was never carried forward to council for acceptance and adoption. So we're hopeful that we can dust that off, engage a consultant to then build on that aspect. So again, a project that we are hopeful to be done in the next 12 months. There will be significant public consultation as part of that, with trails, sidewalk, additional roads.
And that's the master transportation?
That is the master
Okay.
transportation.
Okay. That's good.
Further questions?
Anybody else have questions?
Councillor Elliott, you have a
Just
question?
add to that. I know a bit of the school design, the parking, the transportation outline around both Columbia Park and Arrow Heights, they were designed many years ago, and the mentality now is that parents are driving their kids to school a lot more than they did when I grew up. And I guess that changes the dynamic. I mean, the roads, everything that's been designed to accommodate the way it was 50, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and now the context has changed. Does that create some difficulty?
It does. I think the current way that people utilize the schools has changed significantly. In the past, people were comfortable walking to school, taking the trails through the forest even when it was dark. Those days are past. And so in order to move into the next century, so to speak, we also have to look at narrowing roads to make them feel less comfortable going fast. And so there's a whole range of tools at our disposal with the time and the proper level of planning and engineering that we can improve the safety around these critical facilities.
One of the things that we talked about previously as well, in previous council sessions, we don't see crossing guards. And a lot of communities do have crossing guards, and that's run by the speed. And I know there was always concern with the speed, but I think it's a two-part. There's school has to contribute, or the fact group that are associated with it, which we have to contribute.
And if I may add, Councillor Elliott, after we did meet with at the two school sites, we did reach out to the school district, and the superintendent was very pleased that we're making this effort, and in fact mentioned that the school district would be also participating in some of the costs associated with this. And so as we adopt new plans for the safety around the schools, this again would have to go to the PAC and get sign off from the parents, or maybe some bullet holes in the plan so that we can make it even better, but we need to have the community sign off on this as not just the city, not just the school district, but the parents need to be part of the solution.
Okay, Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, and I'm curious about a level of discussion going on around the schools, and I know we've been talking a lot around the collective impact table, by the Revelstoke, the transportation action team, looking at transit, but also looking at active transportation and multimodal style transportation. And that conversation is geared around looking at it from an affordability lens. So how do we look at reducing poverty by making it easier to move around our community without needing to have a second car so that everybody can drive their kids to school, right? So that's just not feasible for a lot of people. With the master transportation plan coming forward, I'm wondering, do you have any ideas of how that conversation can work together? Is there, because I sit on that action team, so I'm happy to bring that back that way as well.
In other communities, I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Sorry.
In other communities, a plan like this is very large. It typically requires numerous people to be engaged and various stakeholders. I would not anticipate this to be any different than that, and likely to have multiple stakeholder meetings throughout the process to come to some consensus at the end.
Awesome.
So that would be the opportunity. There would also typically, in other communities that I've been in, which we will likely come to council with, is a transportation advisory group that will have a chair from council and senior community members, and then engage the various other community members through meeting, and the recommendations of that TAC would come forward to council for adoption later.
Okay. Great.
So when we talk about the public comments, some of you have some concerns over that. For the first time ever, we've had gone out to the public for comments. We've had the public come back, and we responded to everyone that's made public comments, and especially those on electronic. Is that correct, Ms. McCabe? So we've closed that circle and talked to them about how their comments affect the budget going forward, and there seems to be a positive response with that. Is that correct? Anyone else have any comments? Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, so I saw too there were some concerns about wayfinding signage, and the staff comment here was that phase 1 of the project's being funded by RMI, but I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, I'm on the same page as those people being concerned. I think it's not necessarily something that taxpayers should be paying for, and I'm worried that if phase 1 goes through, I mean, it's already going through, so it's no big deal now, but that we might have really mismatched signage and then be at a point where we're kind of like, oh, this looks really stupid if we don't do anything about it, and then that falls on the taxpayers. So
Yeah.
that's just something
So the words that I've said in my radio show is there is no taxpayer dollars going into this wayfinding project.
not yet.
So, Plan 1, Phase 1 is RMI funds. If we go forward and there are no more RMI funds, then we look for grant funding or some other way to pay for it. Now, am I wrong in that, or am I correct in that, Ms. Lowe?
Through your worship, phase 1 is being entirely paid for through RMI funds, and it is anticipated that the other phases will continue to be funded through RMI funding. It is just a strategy. It doesn't mean that we have to do it, and you are right. You know, if you do get partway through and it looks mismatched, there's been a lot of care and attention put into creating phase 1 so that the bigger ones, the bigger signs, the most attractive signs that people see are being addressed first. And then the other ones will come in. It's actually a 10-year plan.
Right.
So there is signs such as street signs that will slowly be done. That'll be done through O&M, through
Operations.
budgets. So saying that it's in its entirety, there may be some tax funding on there. There could be, but the anticipation is to use RMI funding for the bigger projects. And it meets all the criteria. So Mrs. Braun isn't here today, but that's how she explained it to me, that it is anticipated and the criteria is met, and this is what RMI funding is used for.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Block, you have a comment?
If I might add also, Your Worship, Each phase should come forward to council so that we're only have the first phase approved.
Yeah,
And the
that's
second
correct.
phase, third phase, fourth phase would also come forward for your approval and understanding of what that next task will take care of as far as signage and the appropriate budget attached to it. So there will be time for you to also review
Say
these
yes or
things.
no.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Ryan?
Yeah, it wasn't a question, more of a comment. I just would hate to see that in a few years we kind of get into this position where we're, looking for money for a project that we really don't need.
Right.
That's
Well,
my opinion.
it's being planned.
Yeah.
Councillor Ollie?
I think there's a lot of confusion where this originated. This came from the tourism board trying to create a brand for our city, and they and then we they invited everyone's comment, and they said, okay, well, let's create a neighborhood. We can do some great things with upgrading our community image. So that's where all the other phases came in. So let's start and stick with what we came in with, is rebranding and creating a real jump as they enter our city, and that was what the intent of this was, and that's why the RMI said we'd pay for it.
Yeah.
So that's how it started, and I think it got confused with the taxpayer putting money in, and it just got all blown out of proportion. And I think that needs to be, upfront.
Great, thank you for your comment. Any further questions or comments for Ms. McCabe on the long-term plan?
I have a comment about the zoning. So there was a comment received about doing zoning in conjunction with the OCP and not doing it after the OCP. And then one of the comments in this report says that the budget in 2024 and 2025 for the next OCP update, in 2025 and 2026 is when funds are allocated to update the zoning bylaw.
So is that insinuating that we don't have any budget allowed for that for the next few years?
Through your worship, there's budget now, and then we
Okay.
rebudget again 5 years out, and then we rebudget again 5 years out. It's a continuing cycle. The
Okay.
bylaws, the OCP bylaw,
Okay.
is supposed to be updated every 5 years, and then the zoning follows with that.
I thought maybe this was insinuating that we weren't going to do anything about the
The zoning bylaws until 2026.
No, there's budget for that.
That's kind of how that reads. Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
anything else? Councillor Ollie?
Just on the agreement group, it says that an updated engineering report is due before we start making a commitment to this outlay of funds. Is that right?
Yeah. Ms. Bo, do you want to weigh in or add anything?
Well, it doesn't say that it's before you make a commitment to the funds. It says that you will be receiving an updated. There's been additional inspections done. So
Oh, is
you'll
it right?
be receiving a report. Council and the public will be receiving a report on those in the near future.
So an updated might mean that it needs more work or needs less work.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the
They
question.
really need less work if they basically, they don't heal themselves sort of thing, right? So,
It's actually fun, bro.
The new part-time communications officer who was approved
In 2019, what does their contract look like in terms of if the community's not happy with that and we want to remove it from the budget? Is it like a 2-year contract or what's the deal?
Ms. Bo?
Through your worship, I believe we did a 1-year contract with renewals thereafter.
Yeah, okay, that's right. Okay, so I guess at budget discussions next year, we can assess, like, whether it's been a good use of those funds.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, that's your problem.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Charlotte?
Yeah, just a general comment on the budget and the work and the comments that have come through. I think there's a lot of great engagement from the community talking about some of these hot topics that I was a little nervous going into this, that we wouldn't see enough discussion.
Right.
So it's great to hear where those priorities are, where our values align as a community and the decisions we've been making. I understand some of the frustrations and issues with having patience for some of these things that take time. So like the zoning, the OCP, the master transportation plan. There's all these different pieces in the works that as they come together, I'm really excited to see what we can present back to our community within a relatively short window. I think the discussions that I've been involved, talking with my fellow councillors and with staff, and just the general values and feelings that are being expressed in the direction that we're going, it seems cohesive, it seems simplified. I think things are gonna get a lot simpler to do business with the city, and just how we engage in a shared quality of life. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how it goes. And I'm looking forward to continuing that conversation around the arena. I met here last night, I was gonna mention it just briefly, because I met last night with the Sparks through Girl Guides here in Revelstoke, and we brought them here to the council chambers, and we talked about how we make decisions as a community, because sometimes there's a hard decision to be made. And we talked about the arena, because they were all familiar with it. They all had a close family tie with the arena and the activities that go there. So when we talked about, do we put a Band-Aid on? Do we replace the roof that may or may not give us a bit of time? Or do we go all out and have this great big new arena project, but we have only a certain amount of time to do something? So it was interesting to see the feedback from them. They agreed with what we've voted on so far, is that right now the best decision is to replace the roof and start planning now for that new arena 20, 30 years down the road. Let's start having that conversation as a community, what serves us, what doesn't. And in the meantime, hopefully we hear back on that grant.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be a lot easier.
Any further comments on the motion on the table?
Just
Councillor Elliott?
the last item there about the multiplex complex that was suggested.
Yep.
I think Melissa Hempel led a group that were involved, of various community groups that needed space. And I think they're going to create a report here, or submit a report to council in the next little while. So we should get a summary of what all various different agencies in town, Community Connections, the Housing Society, all these different groups that are involved in looking for, they're in a space crunch. And the current facility is not addressing that. So that should be coming soon. So that may be into the consultation phase that sort of suggested on this last item. So, anyway.
Yeah, and so when we talk about those sort of things moving forward, that's been on our minds for a long time. Having some of the social sector in one area and working together as a group. There's many groups in the community that are working towards that in different ways, and I think that's a positive moving forward. I don't necessarily know that's the same that was proposed by that proponent as far as a multiplex, but what we're doing, I think, is the most prudent thing for the community, both financially and in the works that we need to get done when we're repairing the buildings that we already have so they don't fall into further decay, and move forward on that. So I think all of those things are coming together. It looks like nothing's being done, but I can assure you, as we sit around this table and we see these community groups moving together to get things done, I think that's a positive step. And there's lots of people with lots of suggestions as we move forward. It doesn't affect the 2020 budget, but it will affect how we move forward as a community in the future. Whether it affects the budget of the city or their own budgets will be another thing. Go ahead.
The Columbia Basin Trust has a significant pool of funding available for community space. So if the more groups that are involved with this thing, better it looks on their part. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate that. Any further comments on the motion on the table? Okay, I will ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 2 of that staff report. Councillor Charlotte.
That the city's 2020 to 2024 financial plan and 2020 tax rates bylaws be prepared for council's consideration on the basis of the 2020 to 2034 long-term financial plan.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill. Discussion on the motion. Is there any comments that you wish to make, Ms. McCabe, regarding this motion on the table? Okay. So this is taking into all the reports that we've listened to, the community consultation, all the things that we've done over the past several weeks in moving forward with that. So I'll ask one last time, is there anyone else that would like to make comments, make any statement on this motion? I'll ask the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. McCabe, and to all your team for dealing with the financial plan for 2020. Much appreciated. Okay, moving on to item 11B, engineering. Someone want to put that? Councilor Brooks Hill.
I am going to recuse myself for 11B as well as 12A due to my prior sitting on the board of the NCS.
Okay, great.
Concerns with both.
Thank you for making us aware, Councillor. Okay, Councillors, 11B, Mount Begbie Management Protection Plan, Councillor Ryan.
That a letter be submitted to the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District and to the province of BC in support of a Mount Begbie Development Management and Protection Plan that would be developed with the goal of establishing a regional park in the area.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Ryan.
So, if I understand this correctly, this is just for the development of a management and protection plan
That's
to
correct.
tell the province we want this to be a provincial park.
This is actually a letter going to the CSRD because this area of the community is in the CSRD and asking them to put together a letter to go to the provincial government to deal with this area as a plan. Is that correct, Mr. Black?
It is correct.
Is there anything that you would like to add further to what we've already talked about?
If there's no further questions, I'm content with the presentation so far. However, if there are questions, I would be glad to answer.
So with this letter, if you agree to this letter going forward to the CSRD to develop a plan to support making Mount Begbie a protected area, I'm willing to speak to the CSRD on council's behalf. As I sit on that board, I would explain that we're interested in making this a protected area and go forward with that.
So it makes mention, or the report makes note of the Begbie chalets that were proposed in September. What would the implications be of having it be protected areas? Would that be a not permitted use?
Mr. Black, you care to weigh in on
I'm unaware that that would become an unapproved use. What this recommendation is purely to establish management of the subalpine and alpine areas of Mount Begbie and to ensure that the uses that are there are managed such that we do not have issues with not having waste management, designated camping areas to maintain the trails, and to ensure that because it is in close proximity to the city, that the uses are managed properly so that we don't end up with environmental degradation in the area, and that is it.
By having that kind of a plan, does it in any way encourage development up there? Because it's like, oh look, we've even outlined what development would look like. Would it be more challenging if we didn't have that management plan?
No, I don't think so. This is a Crown land area, so having a development management and protection plan basically secures that we're not going to allow, or we as a community, including the CSRD, wouldn't want anything going up there that doesn't meet what community would like. Is that kind of the comment?
Absolutely.
Mr. Black? So it adds a little bit of protection, but it is Crown land, and Crown has full understanding of how that should be managed. Now, right now, a lot of that land is still in, there's a tree farm license or a tree licensing with BCTS, which is the Crown Forestry Corporation. And so that may have some impact on what gets done up there and what doesn't get done.
So who's actually creating the management and protection plan? Like, who
It would be
responsible for
it
that?
would be a letter to the government asking them to produce this. Is that correct?
Okay.
And to, Your Worship, and to be clear, this would only be above the tree license areas. It would not impact the tree license areas. And so that's the gist of this recommendation. It's, again, the alpine, subalpine areas.
Councillor Elliott, you had a question?
I mean, I was just at the ski resort on the weekend, and I took a photo of what's taking place on Mount Begbie and McPherson, and it's clear-cut to a bottom. And it's kind of embarrassing that this is in a tourism channel, but this is what it is. This is part of our life as well. So in our backyard, we have this sort of logging is approved and no problem, no questions asked. We have a mining rights for the upper part of Begbie as well. So if they decide whatever minerals up there that's valuable, it's they can extract it with no problems at all. So there's no restrictions on it. And I say, it's a tricky situation.
Yeah.
You know, for us to create a district park, a regional park, is that enough? I mean, to me, I would protect McPherson. We're still in the same boat. They can be logged completely if there's, the wood is valuable enough. And I say we have something bigger than just Begbie. We have that whole zone that could be created as a regional park, as an option.
Well, those are parts of the conversation to have with them. We start small and we work up from there. And so a conversation, I'm going to let you speak, you have your hand up, but conversation that Councillor Gillette and I had was talking about protection of the valley in some degree as to how that works. And so at least so there's some management over things. You have to understand it's all Crown land. And all we do is can make recommendations. But if we make recommendations based on what the community wants as a whole, and I think that's a positive. I'll let you speak.
Yeah, this is something that I've been vocal about since before the election and getting to this table. And the more I learn about the different layers of governance that affect our lands, especially in this valley, it seems, is that there's so many overlapping pieces and it's hard to know whose jurisdiction everything is in. And I think we have an opportunity in this day and age to have a more cohesive, collective voice and vision of what does this valley look like? How do we balance environmental protection so that we have this valley for years to come without these great big swaths of clear cut, while still allowing our industry to be strong and providing the backbone of this community? It's a hard thing to juggle, that I don't think that land use has been discussed as fully as it could be, and I hate to play whack-a-mole with trying to protect one specific area, then trying to protect the next specific area, then trying to protect the next specific area. I would rather have clarity of vision as collectively with the CSRD, with the province. What does this valley look like? How are we managing all of this together? So hopefully this letter will be that beginning of the relationship, building the relationship, finding out more about where the opportunities are and why we are in the situation we're in. If it's just because nobody was going there before or nobody was paying attention to people going there before and now we are, how do we bring this around to a more rational conversation?
Okay. Any further comments or discussion, Councillor?
Yeah, in that letter, are there going to be specific recommendations, like about what the community wants, or is it just saying, you know, we have no plan, we'd like a plan?
Well, I think we need to discuss it first of all with CSRD and see if they're interested in providing a letter. And then they will go out to the constituents and say, what do we want to see? And part of that will be us sitting at the table saying, hey, this is what we want. The idea of is just sending a letter to the government to put them on notice that we want to have a protection plan and that we all as stakeholders want to sit at the table as how that protection plan is moved forward. So this is the preliminary thing, writing the letter to the CSRD, see if they're interested. If they're interested, they'll send a letter out as well to the provincial government saying this area in Revelstoke area B, rural area, is a concern and that we want to have discussions. And so our Area B director is going to weigh in, and then the CSRD table is going to weigh in, and they're basically going to come up with something to at least start the process. And then I anticipate that there would be some sort of engagement as we move forward.
Okay, yeah, that's just what I'm most concerned about. I would hate to say yes to this and then there actually be specific recommendations that we're not on board with. But it sounds like this is just the first step to.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Councillor Elliott.
But isn't the first step asking for this land management plan? Hasn't that been asked for and heads banging against the wall? Like we're not getting any response about the shared use of land management on the Crown land?
Well, I'm not sure we're banging our head against the wall. I think people are listening. I think the Crown's probably listening. But how we move forward is basically writing a letter stating that we would like a management plan. And so some of you may have some comment regarding that.
At the Environmental Advisory Committee, we had canceled this month's meeting because it falls in spring break, but in the April meeting, I believe Jody Lowndes is going to be coming to the committee to present on previous letters and previous asks for land use management plans. I think it was the backcountry recreation that was dealt with in the past, so she's going to be coming presenting because she was involved at that time. so that we can have a bigger discussion around that environmental advisory committee and then probably send something further back. But this being that first step, and then we'll get some more background and then see where we can go with it.
I just wonder whether creating a district park adds more complications to the whole story. Should we just get this land management plan dealt with first?
I think asking for the letter to deal with this is the first step, and that's where we're at. This is the first step. We're in incubation mode where let's just get this letter and see how this goes forward first. And you're asking the CSRD to put this together and to move forward and doing it in a way of writing a letter and moving things. So now you've got the attention of everyone around the table saying, hey, we need to do a management plan for this. This is the first step moving forward. The CSRD will be the second step. They will take it from there. And then there will be some sort of engagement process. And that's where my seat at the table on the CSRD will come into play. And as well as the Area B director, where they will ask for engagement. What's going to be best suited to the people that live in our corridor? And then we talk about that. Councilor Ryan.
Since you're our main contact point with the CSRD, and since you will be sitting at that table, I'm curious what your opinion is on that area.
Well, I think there has to be a management plan of some sort. If you just leave it, then all of a sudden you've left it open to developers coming forward and going to the Crown without coming to us or to any of the stakeholders or the people that live in the community.
Yeah.
If you have a management plan, it basically you've now put the government on notice saying, we would like this managed in some way that works with the area. And I think that's the prudent thing to do as we move forward. Ms. Lowe.
Through your worship, there's already 4 recreational sites on Mount Begbie that aren't being managed, so that's what we're asking, is that they get a plan together to manage, like the director of engineering said about the waste and the wastewater and how big the developments can be and have some sort of a plan, because it's gonna keep getting attacked for development. So how do we manage that and how do we protect the best that we can, because it's actually CSRD land.
Right.
We're just a referral.
Councilor Charlotte.
Yeah, and I'm almost thinking too, instead of looking at it as the first step, if the previous ask about that larger land use plan was the first ask and we didn't get anywhere with that for whatever reason, this is a smaller ask to start in with, to hopefully get some movement and then having that broader discussion, hopefully broadening it out.
Okay.
Conversation I had with Lonnie Parker, the previous CSRD, she's had this land management plan on her list for many years.
Yeah.
And it's been proposed and been proposed and resubmitted. And,
Yeah.
but the province is the one that makes the decision, not the CSRD.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I'm just curious what our
And it's a-
looking.
And it's a different landscape now, different
Good.
landscape now than it was in the past. Right, we're seeing, I was reading some of the responses from the UBCM resolutions from last year, and the change of tone in the responses from the government to these asks is so night and day. So it is totally, we're dusting off all these old asks, like, okay, maybe now is the time that we're ready now to be able to address this.
Good. Any further discussion on this motion?
I just want to make sure, like, because I tell you about this photo, I'll forward it to you, but it's just a travesty of what we've done in Mount Begbie. That whole shoulder goes to just snow line, and it's devastated. And I'm saying, really, what are we protecting? It's not non-caribou anymore. It's so far gone that it's embarrassing. And now we're saying, okay, someone's proposed to put an outline lodge. Is that what we're blocking? Is that our attempt to block an outline lodge?
Our attempt is to manage all things on Mount Begbie, to have a management plan for all things moving forward.
Well, first of all, we should be talking forestry and mining, but that's the truth.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. We move on to correspondence. Item 12A, Jordan River Trail gravel pit application and rezoning / OCP. We have a letter in our package from Mrs. Thompson regarding her concerns over the Jordan River Trail. There's a gravel pit application that has been given temporary 2-year status on there to do some checking out as to what's going to be best moving forward. Ms. Lowe, do you have any comments, or are you okay with me carrying on? Okay, so in looking at this and looking at gravel pit applications and the sensitive area that this is in, given the fact that these people are given, this is all Crown land and that the Crown land is managed by the BC government, they've given a temporary tenure to this group to look this over to see what's going to be the best. We're concerned as well as to the river trail. So behind the scenes, we are working with the provincial government to see what's going to be the best for this. But one of the things that we're planning to do in our OCB and our zone planning is to go through some of the neighborhoods, and if council would like to get the west side area and Columbia Park, kind of the third in a row. We've got two in the queue now, or two that we're working on, Johnson Heights and Arrow Heights. We're going to put a motion on the table for that, and that would speed up the process as far as getting that whole area looked at as far as how we should deal with zoning and the OCP and that sort of thing. The one thing I want to make aware of is this is Crown land, and that we have to be careful when we're dealing with Crown land, but we need to make sure that our zoning for our community is done in accordance to the OCP as we make sure we move forward with updates. So is there any comments from Councillor Charlotte?
I'm just curious about adding that as a third neighborhood plan makes sense to me, especially just looking at those outlying areas in order. But I know there's a lot of work going on with Johnson Heights and Arrow Heights as well. So if we made a resolution to add Columbia Park and West Side as a third neighborhood, what kind of timelines are we talking about, and would that put our other neighborhood plans in jeopardy of slowing down, or?
No, I think what's going to happen, instead of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7 or whatever, I think Columbia Park was kind of number 5, and we would just switch it and move it to number 3,
Okay. Yep.
and then just move forward, because it seems to be a little more important to deal with that area at this time.
I could see a few areas in that. I used to live there for quite a while, so there's some beautiful spots in there that could definitely stand to be
Yeah,
taken care of.
and so we look at the whole OCP process, we look at zoning, we look at neighborhood planning, and we bring the concerns that Mrs. Thompson has brought forward, we bring this to the table as well, and we look at those sorts of things and see what's going to be the best. Any further comments on that letter that you have concerns about? Councillor Ryan and Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, it sounds like the temporary license that they've been granted means that if they want to apply to amend it and increase the size of the proposed pits and extend the time, that they're able to use it that they can do that without any public process.
Well,
So I think that's the biggest concern.
there's a whole laundry list for them that they have to go through before they even get to that part. Is that not correct?
Through your worship, they are required to meet, yes, a large list of requirements that have been set out by the province that was actually put forward by this council. So that is actually a really good win that council got, that the province did push these requirements off onto this project. And while they're in this temporary occupation license, they cannot extract gravel or remove any trees. And that's straight out of the province's mandate. So they have to fulfill all the requirements before they can do anything. And if they do have to reapply for a license for gravel extraction, it has to come back to council.
Okay,
They
so
have to
what,
reapply.
so I'm not sure then what this,
I think it
this
was a
person was.
misunderstanding.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so they would have to reapply.
Yeah.
To
Yeah,
amend.
because they don't have a license to use, or
To
they have a
extract
license to
gravel, yeah.
occupy, they don't have a license to extract gravel at this point.
Right.
And will they get that? I can't predict that, but they do have to reconsult the city.
Right, but if there's anything we can do to stop it now, then that really helps our case, because if we don't take that action now and the province sees that, then, you know, like in 2 years, they're gonna be like, well, you had your chance 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So when we look at that sort of thing, we want to make sure that we have zoning that's in accordance with our OCP, and as we amend the OCP, so it's something broad range, encompasses everything as we were talking about the entire valley, deal with that in a progressive way, not coming forward and saying, well, we're just going to zone this one little area just to stop this. They have a 2-year tenure. They have to go through their list. They can't just do things or amend things just that quickly. It has to come back to the Crown, and then we weigh in as well and give our opinions. So I think we've got a bit of time to deal with this. I don't think we need to panic, but also I don't think we need to drag our feet either as far as getting
Okay.
things done.
So do we have to make a motion to move it up in our neighborhood plan to make it sooner?
Your worship, may I suggest that if we are making a motion to expedite land use in that area, that not only do we give direction to move the neighborhood plan up sooner in our OCP review, but we also direct staff to look into any other possibilities of protection for that piece of land in the meantime.
That's a good idea. I
Okay.
would happily put that motion.
So you want to do that as one motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make that exact motion.
And Councillor Charlotte, you're going to second it? Any further, Councillor Charlotte?
No,
Any further discussion on this motion?
just a point of clarity, riparian protection, that's a provincial jurisdiction, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we can't zone for riparian. If an area is a wetland, we can't, it shouldn't affect our zoning. That's not the right tool to control infringement on riparian. It's a provincial jurisdiction.
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
any wetlands, anyone encroaches on the watershed, boom, province comes down and
Yeah.
pays the head. They're the guys that write the tickets.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right, so when we did our, I think Councilor Cross previously
Yes.
mentioned an application to protect riparian zones in our zones.
Sensitive areas is
Yeah,
what.
I'm not sure if that works. Maybe you can fill me in.
Your worship, I believe what we were looking into was maybe possibly having an extension on the riparian areas to make them larger, and cities and municipalities can do that.
Right.
So that was one. The base of the problem is that we don't have the environmentally sensitive areas identified properly in our OCP. So that's why if we do it as part of the neighborhood plan, we can establish them properly. And then we can put in the protections like gravel extraction bylaws, and there's a lot of different other protections that we can put in. Ultimately, Crown, as you said, has the decision. But if we put in our protections properly, we won't be scrambling anymore.
So if the Crown has a set of regulations regarding a creek and how far you can,
They still have to follow riparian.
yeah, so you're saying we can extend it beyond
Some
provincial?
municipalities have. We could
Okay.
look into that for sure.
Yeah, and maybe, that might be an option for us
Yeah.
as well.
And that's part of this motion on the table, is it extends our ability, or asks our staff to extend our ability to protect these areas more comprehensively.
As fast.
But our option to protect that area is change the zone, whether it's parkland or use for that particular, whatever we deem is the area that's affected, right? We change the use for that particular chunk of land.
Well, we can only,
We can't zone for riparian protection.
well, if we own the land, we can.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about Crown land, we can only make recommendations. So if on our land, we have these things down pat, and then we have a gravel extraction bylaw and that sort of thing, and those are the things that we work within to make sure that we're protecting these things.
Can we apply for park status? Sorry. We have an option here.
Well, through your-
National park or?
No, regional park, or no, municipal park.
So designation for parkland has to be done in cooperation with the landowner. So the landowner would have to be worked with to create parkland designation. You can't just zone something parkland. So parkland is owned by the city. So during an OCP process, we would be in conversations with Crown Land.
So if we're writing a letter to the province for putting a regional park on Begbie, could we not do it for a municipal park on the river?
And that's kind of what we were talking about, being comprehensive and looking at the whole area. That's kind of what we're talking about. So I don't want to include this part of the conversation in with the other part, but by the same token, I think if we put things in the works where our staff can look at what's the best way to protect this area and work forward, I think now we've got something going on. You okay with that? All right. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Any further conversation on that? We're good? All right, let's let our counselor back in.
A long break.
So moving on to item 11B, Revelstoke Arts Council request for Luna support letter. Any comments on that? I think from my perspective, giving the Arts Council a support letter dealing with that is an appropriate thing. Luna definitely is quite an event, and it was quite an event this year. Any comments, any further comments on that?
Do we financially support them as well?
No, let's not open the purse strings. Let's just
No, I'm just curious how much, it's certainly valuable and a well-received event. So.
I think they're asking for a letter of support in their fundraising efforts.
Do we find them?
Councilor Bergso.
Yeah, I'm totally in favor of it. I seem to remember they were a little bit open-ended about what exactly they wanted us to say, but I think writing the nicest letter possible. And we need a motion for that, or?
Yeah, we can make a motion that we support a letter going forward. Who wants to make that motion? You want to do that, Councilor Bergso? Seconder, Councilor Ryan. Okay. Any further discussion on sending a support letter? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Moving on to item 12C, another support letter. This is not asking for any funds. This is in support of our rural and remote family practices. So our physicians here are coming up with a plan to ask for primary care network for Revelstoke, and they're asking for our support. I'm supportive of that, and basically the recommendation is that we're recommending to Minister of Health consider the TELUS Insights population report and findings of the resident population count of 13 to 14,700 people. There's a reason for that. They can ask for primary care networks if we have a population of over 10,000, and that means that they would be able to make decisions for our health care in our area on their own and in conjunction with Interior Health, rather than us being lumped together with bigger centers. So I'm quite supportive of this moving forward. Any questions, Councilor Ryan?
Yeah, what does that involvement look like from the city's standpoint if and when that gets underway?
It's just support. They will come at some other point of time if they get what they want. As far as primary care network, they will look at having a comprehensive facility, possibly with multiple agencies involved, just as we were talking about it a few minutes ago. But that's just down the road. So we need to get from kind of point one to point
right,
two.
But it would be multiple agencies. It wouldn't be one or two. It would be all.
That's what the whole idea of primary care network is, bringing everybody together so we're all on the same page and working in conjunction with each other.
Okay. So presumably Jill would be sort of involved in that in some capacity since she's connected to the different agencies through her work.
I have no idea who. I know that the Physicians Community Connections, and I'm assuming that Jill and all the other networks would sit at a table to make this work.
Okay.
That's the intention.
Okay.
So right now, all they're asking for is us to send a letter recommending that Interior Health take into consideration TELUS Insights population-wise. Okay, any further discussion on that? Can someone put a motion on the table? Councillor Charlotte,
That the Revelstoke population discussion brief dated March 2020 be endorsed.
seconder for that motion, Councillor Ryan. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. We're going to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1A and G of the Community Charter. Somebody want to make that motion? Councillor Charlotte, seconder, Councillor Brooks Hill. All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going in camera. We're going to take a 5